that point to rising despair in the McCain campaign. Politico tonight reporting that some of McCain's own advisors are engaged in what they call blame casting, and some top congressional aides slamming him for what they said was an unfocused message.
Well, Anderson, coming to Washington today, I found that Democratic and Republican insiders universally believe that this campaign is slipping away from John McCain, that he only has 3 or 4 days to turn the momentum around in his favor, and that unless he does so, there's a growing prospect that Senator Obama and the Democrats will rack up a huge victory, possibly on November 4th. So that naturally, in that kind of environment, invites people to start getting, the knives start coming out, and people, making their preliminary assessments and blame pointing the other way. I don't think the candidate is in any mood to do that. He's in no mood to give up. He's a fighter, and he has a history of closing strong. But there has never been as much peace and tranquility and harmony within the McCain camp. It has a history of going back over several campaigns of folks, a fair amount of personal dislike, even though they believe very strongly in the candidate.
Paul, in an interview with Washington Times, McCain blasted President Bush, saying his administration, I quote, let things get completely out of hand, and went on to list a handful of policies he would have handled differently. It's interesting because you and James Carville predicted earlier this week, I think on Huffington Post, that the finger pointing was about to begin.
And
go ahead.
And it has, and I couldn't be happier.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well, no, let me set my partisan hat off for a second. The truth is, the only way, let's presume that McCain loses, which I think looks reasonably likely. The only way to revivify a party is to figure out what went wrong. Carville and I wrote a book very tough on our party in 2005 after the Democrats lost that presidential election. And a whole lot of Democrats were, I think, quite wisely, trying to pull it apart and figure out what went wrong. This thing with the Republicans, though, Democrats, we go off in a yurt somewhere and, smoke pot and meditate and try to decide what we believe in, right? Republicans, man, they have a knife fight. It's going to be vicious. It's going to be like steel cage death match. It's going to be great. And what's happening is, I'm picking this up too, as David is, the old Reagan guys are blaming Bush. The McCain guys are blaming Bush. The Bush guys are, of course, blaming McCain and his campaign. I think they're all right. This has been a really terrible campaign run in a really difficult time. I mean, McCain was dealt a terrible hand by President Bush, and he's played it as badly as he could.
Alex, is it possible that, some Republicans may not want to hear McCain slamming Bush, but is it possible that could be a strategy that, if David Gergen says the next 3 or 4 days are crucial, that might work for him in this late in the game, trying to woo some undecideds?
It's one of the few things he has left that he can do. But, there are a couple of ways to separate yourself from something that's unpopular. And most of the time, candidates choose the weakest way, and that is to attack it. And the problem with attacking, say, your own brand, the Republican brand, or your own president, is you get tangled up with it. You have to actually move closer to it to attack it. The other way to separate yourself from something that's unpopular is to turn in a different direction, to lead, to transform yourself. And the McCain campaign didn't seem to do that early in the campaign, and now the only choice it has left is to attack really its own brand, its own party, and that's a tough thing to have to do late in the campaign.
Alex, David, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. Alex is absolutely right about that. The interesting comparison, I know people don't like to hear about foreign countries very much, but there was, in France, Sarkozy was running as the nominee of a very, very unpopular incumbent party. And instead of attacking the incumbent party, what he did was offer something. He offered himself as a fresh kind of candidate, and he won it. And he won it convincingly, and he's been very popular there for the most part. It is possible to do. They have not chosen to go that way.
We're going to have more with our panel coming up. I promise not to ask either David Gergen or Alex Castellanos if they've ever been into a yurt or smoked. We'll have more.